In the world of royal protocol, some moments are planned decades in advance, while others unfold like carefully choreographed secrets waiting for their perfect moment to shine. When Catherine stepped into the grand ballroom that evening, wearing a tiara that had remained locked away for nearly 4 decades, she wasn't just making a fashion statement. She was rewriting the very rules of royal tradition. The gasps that echoed through the historic halls weren't just about the stunning diamonds catching the light, but about what this moment truly meant for the future of the monarchy itself. This is the story of how one woman's courage to break with convention during the most important state visit in recent memory would forever change how the world sees royal duty, personal choice, and the delicate balance between honoring the past while embracing the future. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Windsor Castle, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors as Catherine walked through corridors that had witnessed centuries of royal history. Her footsteps echoed softly as she made her way to the private chambers where the most precious royal jewels were kept, under careful guard. Today was different from any other day in her royal life, and she could feel the weight of anticipation settling on her shoulders like an invisible cloak. The state visit from the Japanese Emperor and Empress had been planned for months, with every detail scrutinized and approved by multiple committees. Protocol officers had worked tirelessly to ensure that every aspect of the 3-day visit would reflect the deep respect and friendship between the two nations. Catherine had attended countless meetings, reviewed endless documents, and participated in numerous rehearsals to prepare for her role in welcoming the distinguished guests. Yet despite all this preparation, she found herself facing an unexpected decision that would test everything she had learned about being a member of the royal family. 3 weeks earlier, during a routine inventory of the crown jewels, the Queen's personal dresser had made a discovery that sent ripples through the inner circles of the palace. Deep within one of the secure vaults, wrapped in layers of silk and stored in a climate-controlled case, was a tiara that had not seen the light of day since 1987. The Lotus Flower Tiara, as it was formerly known, was a masterpiece of craftsmanship created in the early 1900s for Queen Alexandra. Its design featured intricate lotus blossoms made from perfectly matched diamonds, with each petal carefully shaped and set to catch light from every possible angle. The tiara had a fascinating history that made it both precious and controversial within royal circles. Originally commissioned as a gift from the people of British India, it represented a complex chapter in the empire's history. After India's independence, there had been ongoing discussions about the appropriateness of wearing pieces that symbolized colonial relationships. As a result, the tiara had been quietly retired from public view, stored away while debates continued behind closed doors about its future. Catherine had learned about the tiara's existence only recently, when she was being fitted for the gowns she would wear during the state visit. The Queen's dresser, a woman who had served the royal family for over 4 decades, had mentioned it almost casually while adjusting the hem of an evening dress. The casual mention had sparked Catherine's curiosity, leading her to research the piece's history and significance. What she discovered fascinated her. The tiara was not just a beautiful piece of jewelry, but a work of art that told a story about cultural exchange, artistic collaboration, and the complex relationships between nations. The lotus flower motif was deeply meaningful in both British and Asian cultures, representing purity, rebirth, and the ability to rise above difficult circumstances while maintaining beauty and grace. The more Catherine learned about the piece, the more she felt drawn to it. The Japanese state visit presented a unique opportunity. The Emperor and Empress were known for their deep appreciation of art and cultural heritage. The Emperor himself was a scholar who had written extensively about the importance of preserving and honoring historical artifacts while acknowledging the complex histories they sometimes represented. Catherine began to see the tiara not as a relic of a problematic past, but as a bridge between cultures and a symbol of how beauty and artistry could transcend political boundaries. Her request to wear the tiara during the state banquet had initially been met with surprise and concern from palace officials. The piece had been off-limits for so long that many younger staff members were not even aware of its existence. Senior advisors worried about the potential controversy, while others questioned whether it was appropriate for Catherine to make such a significant decision about a historically sensitive piece. The discussions that followed were intense and sometimes heated. Palace historians were consulted to provide detailed background on the tiara's creation and the circumstances of its retirement from public use. Foreign Office officials weighed in on the potential diplomatic implications of reintroducing the piece during a state visit. Security experts assessed the risks of displaying such a valuable and historically significant item at a public event. Throughout these deliberations, Catherine remained calm but determined. She had done her research thoroughly and was prepared to defend her decision with facts and thoughtful reasoning. She pointed out that the lotus flower was a symbol that resonated positively in Japanese culture, where it was associated with enlightenment, purity, and the Buddha himself. She argued that wearing the tiara would actually demonstrate respect for Asian cultural values, while showcasing the artistic achievements that had resulted from historical cultural exchanges. Her most compelling argument, however, was more personal and philosophical. Catherine believed that hiding beautiful objects because of complex histories was not the answer to addressing past injustices. Instead, she proposed that acknowledging the full story of such pieces, including their problematic aspects, while celebrating their artistic merit, could be a way of moving forward constructively. She suggested that the state visit provided an ideal opportunity to demonstrate this approach, with guests who would appreciate both the beauty of the piece and the thoughtfulness behind the decision to display it. The debate continued for days, with various royal family members weighing in on the decision. Some supported Catherine's position, admiring her thoughtful approach and her willingness to take on the responsibility of reintroducing such a significant piece. Others remained skeptical, worried about unpredictable public reactions and the precedent that might be set for future decisions about sensitive historical artifacts. As the state visit approached, the pressure mounted. Catherine found herself in the unusual position of having to advocate not just for her personal choice, but for a broader philosophy about how the royal family should approach its historical legacy. She spent hours in meetings with advisors, historians, and protocol officers, refining her arguments and addressing every concern that was raised. The media, meanwhile, remained completely unaware of the discussions taking place behind palace walls. Speculation about Catherine's wardrobe for the state visit focused on which designer she might choose, and whether she would wear any particularly significant jewelry. Fashion experts offered predictions about colors and styles, but none suspected that a decision of such historical magnitude was being debated in private. Catherine's husband supported her position throughout the process, understanding the deeper significance of her choice and the courage it required to challenge established protocol. He had seen her grow more confident in her role over the years, and he recognized this moment as a turning point where she was ready to take on greater responsibility for shaping how the royal family engaged with its heritage. The final decision came just 3 days before the Japanese guests were scheduled to arrive. After one last lengthy meeting with senior advisors and family members, Catherine received permission to wear the lotus flower tiara to the state banquet. The decision came with conditions, including requirements for additional security measures and preparations for potential media questions about the choice. Catherine felt a mixture of relief and nervous excitement as she received the news. She understood that she would be taking a significant risk, but she also felt confident that her decision was well-reasoned and respectful. The next step would be the most challenging, actually wearing the tiara in public for the first time in 37 years and facing whatever reactions might follow. As she prepared for the days ahead, Catherine reflected on how much her role had evolved since joining the royal family. She had learned to balance respect for tradition with the need for thoughtful change, and she had developed the confidence to make difficult decisions when she believed they were right. The lotus flower tiara would be more than just an accessory. It would be a symbol of her growth as a royal and her commitment to using her position to promote understanding and cultural appreciation. The stage was set for a moment that would be remembered not just for its visual impact, but for the thoughtful consideration and courage that made it possible. The Japanese Imperial aircraft touched down at Heathrow Airport precisely on schedule, marking the beginning of what palace officials hoped would be one of the most successful state visits in recent memory. Catherine stood beside her husband on the red carpet that had been rolled out for the arrival ceremony, her mind already racing ahead to the evening's banquet, and the moment when she would finally reveal the decision that had consumed so much thought and discussion over the past weeks. The Emperor and Empress emerged from their aircraft with the dignity and grace that had made them beloved figures not just in Japan but around the world. Emperor Naruhito, with his scholarly demeanor and genuine warmth, had already established himself as a modernizing influence on the ancient institution of the Japanese monarchy. Empress Masako, with her international background and fluent English, had overcome significant personal challenges to become an effective advocate for cultural exchange and understanding. As Catherine greeted the imperial couple, she felt an immediate connection with the Empress, who had herself navigated the complex process of adapting to royal life after a successful career in diplomacy. The two women exchanged knowing glances that spoke to their shared understanding of the unique pressures and opportunities that came with their positions. Catherine found herself thinking that the Empress would likely understand and appreciate the significance of the decision she had made about the tiara. The first day of the state visit proceeded flawlessly, with ceremonies at Westminster Abbey and meetings with government officials that reinforced the strong bonds between Britain and Japan. Catherine participated in various events, including a visit to a Japanese cultural centre in London, where she demonstrated her growing knowledge of Japanese customs and traditions. The media coverage was uniformly positive, with commentators praising the warmth of the welcome and the evident friendship between the two royal couples. Behind the scenes, however, Catherine was dealing with mounting pressure about the evening's banquet. The palace staff responsible for jewellery and formal wear had spent the morning carefully cleaning and preparing the lotus flower tiara for its first public appearance since 1987. Security arrangements had been modified to account for the additional attention the piece might attract, and backup plans had been developed in case any unexpected situations arose. The afternoon brought final rehearsals and briefings for the state banquet, one of the most formal and elaborate events in the royal calendar. Catherine reviewed the seating arrangements, the order of toasts, and the protocol for various ceremonial elements of the evening. She also met with the palace's press secretary to discuss potential questions about her jewellery choice, though they agreed to keep specific details confidential until the event itself. As Catherine prepared for the banquet in her private apartments, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that reminded her of her wedding day. The gown she had chosen was a creation in deep sapphire blue silk, a colour that would complement the diamonds in the tiara, while also showing respect for the Japanese flag. The dress featured subtle embroidery that incorporated elements inspired by both British and Japanese floral motifs, a detail that few would notice, but that Catherine felt added meaning to her overall appearance. The moment of putting on the tiara was both thrilling and sobering. As the Queen's dresser carefully positioned the piece on Catherine's head, adjusting it to ensure both security and optimal visual impact, Catherine caught sight of herself in the mirror and felt the full weight of history settling around her. The diamonds caught the light brilliantly, creating points of fire that seemed to dance with every slight movement of her head. The tiara felt heavier than she had expected, not just physically but emotionally. She was wearing a piece that had been created during the height of the British Empire, crafted by hands that had shaped precious stones with techniques passed down through generations. She was also wearing a piece that represented complex relationships between cultures and nations, relationships that had evolved dramatically over the decades since the tiara was last worn in public. Catherine's final preparations included a private moment of reflection, in which she reminded herself of all the research and consideration that had gone into her decision. She thought about the conversations with historians, the discussions with cultural experts, and the careful analysis of how this choice might be received by different audiences. She felt confident that her decision was well-informed and respectful, even as she acknowledged that not everyone would understand or appreciate her reasoning. The walk from her private apartments to the state dining room felt longer than usual, with Catherine acutely aware of the anticipation that surrounded the evening. Palace staff members who caught glimpses of her in the corridors struggled to maintain their professional composure, clearly struck by the dramatic visual impact of seeing the historic tiara on a living person rather than in photographs or storage. Catherine's husband met her just outside the dining room, his expression mixing admiration with concern for the scrutiny she was about to face. They shared a brief private conversation in which he reminded her of his support and confidence in her judgment. Catherine felt strengthened by his words and by the knowledge that she was not facing this moment alone. The state dining room had been transformed for the occasion, with elaborate floral arrangements that incorporated both British roses and Japanese cherry blossoms. The table settings featured the finest china and crystal, with gold cutlery that gleamed under the light from massive chandeliers. Every detail had been carefully planned to create an atmosphere of elegance and international friendship. As the guests began to arrive, Catherine could sense the subtle shift in atmosphere when people caught sight of her tiara. Experienced royal watchers and jewelry experts in attendance recognized immediately that this was something special and historically significant, even if they could not immediately identify the specific piece. The murmur of conversation took on a different quality as people tried to get better views while maintaining appropriate diplomatic composure. The Emperor and Empress, arriving precisely on time according to protocol, showed genuine pleasure at the care that had been taken with every aspect of the evening. The Empress, herself wearing magnificent pearl jewelry that had belonged to previous Japanese empresses, noticed Catherine's tiara immediately and complimented her on the beautiful piece. Catherine was relieved to see that the Empress's reaction was one of appreciation rather than surprise or concern. As the evening progressed through its various formal stages, Catherine began to relax slightly. The conversation with her dinner companions flowed naturally, covering topics ranging from contemporary art to educational exchange programs between their two countries. The emperor proved to be as knowledgeable and engaging as his reputation suggested, while the empress shared insights from her diplomatic background that enriched every discussion. The formal toasts went smoothly, with both sides expressing genuine appreciation for the friendship between their nations and their shared commitment to peace and cultural understanding. Catherine felt that the choice of the lotus flower tiara was proving to be appropriate for the occasion, as several speakers made references to the importance of learning from history while building positive relationships for the future. The media presence at the banquet was limited but significant, with official photographers capturing key moments for release to news organizations around the world. Catherine was aware of their presence but tried not to let it distract her from engaging authentically with the guests and the significance of the occasion. She knew that the photographs taken that evening would be analyzed and discussed for days to come. As the evening moved toward its conclusion, Catherine felt a growing sense of satisfaction with how events had unfolded. The banquet had achieved its diplomatic objectives while also serving as a successful debut for the historic tiara. The reactions from guests had been universally positive, with many expressing admiration for both the beauty of the piece and the thoughtfulness behind the decision to bring it back into public view. The moment that would be remembered most vividly came during the final formal photographs, when Catherine stood beside the Japanese imperial couple for pictures that would appear in newspapers and magazines around the world. The lotus flower tiara caught the camera flashes brilliantly, creating images that perfectly captured the elegance and international friendship that the state visit was meant to represent. As the guests began to take their leave, Catherine received numerous compliments on her appearance and her choice of jewelry. Several people commented specifically on the lotus flower motif and its cultural significance, suggesting that her decision to wear the tiara had been understood and appreciated by those who mattered most. The Empress, in particular, thanked Catherine for the evident care and respect that had gone into every aspect of the evening. The immediate aftermath of the banquet brought a sense of relief mixed with anticipation about how the evening would be received by the media and the public. Catherine knew that the real test of her decision would come in the days ahead, as photographs were published and commentators had time to research and discuss the significance of the tiara's reappearance after 37 years of absence from public view. The morning after the state banquet dawned with an intensity that Catherine had not quite expected. As she sipped her early morning tea while reviewing the initial press coverage, she realized that her decision to wear the lotus flower tiara had created exactly the kind of thoughtful discussion she had hoped for, though the volume and reach of that discussion was far greater than anyone had anticipated. Photographs from the banquet had appeared on front pages across the globe, with the image of Catherine wearing the historic tiara becoming one of the most widely shared royal photographs in recent memory. The visual impact was undeniable. The diamonds seemed to capture and reflect light in a way that made the images almost luminous, while Catherine's confident bearing suggested someone completely comfortable with the significance of her choice. The initial media reaction was overwhelmingly positive, though it came with the kind of detailed analysis that Catherine had expected. Royal correspondents and jewelry historians had worked through the night to research the tiara's background, and their reports provided readers with comprehensive information about the piece's creation, its cultural significance, and the reasons for its long absence from public view. Several major newspapers ran extensive features that placed Catherine's choice in the broader context of how modern royals were approaching historical artifacts with complex backgrounds. The consensus among expert commentators was that Catherine had demonstrated remarkable thoughtfulness and cultural sensitivity in her approach to reintroducing the piece. Many praised her for showing how historical objects could be honored and displayed, while acknowledging their full context. The international reaction was particularly gratifying for Catherine and the palace officials who had supported her decision. Japanese media coverage was universally positive, with commentators noting the respect shown through the choice of a tiara featuring lotus flowers, a symbol deeply meaningful in Japanese culture. Several Japanese cultural experts were quoted expressing appreciation for the way Catherine had clearly researched and understood the significance of the motif she was wearing. The response from the Japanese imperial couple themselves came in the form of a personal note delivered to Catherine later that morning. The Empress wrote eloquently about her admiration for Catherine's courage in bringing the beautiful piece back into public view, and she expressed particular appreciation for the cultural sensitivity that had clearly informed the decision. The Emperor added his own thoughts about the importance of preserving and celebrating artistic achievements while learning from the complex histories they sometimes represented. Social media reaction was swift and largely enthusiastic, with fashion experts and royal watchers praising both the visual impact of Catherine's appearance and the thoughtful approach she had taken to the historical significance of her jewelry choice. The hashtag Lotus Flower Tiara began trending worldwide within hours of the first photographs being published, with users sharing their own research about the piece and expressing admiration for Catherine's decision to bring it back into public view. Not all reactions were entirely positive, however. and Catherine had expected this. Some critics questioned whether it was appropriate to wear jewelry with colonial connections, regardless of how thoughtfully the decision had been made. These voices, while relatively few in number, raised important questions about how society should approach artifacts from complex historical periods. Catherine found herself genuinely appreciating these critical perspectives, as they reflected the kind of serious engagement with historical issues that she had hoped her decision would encourage. Rather than feeling defensive, she saw the criticism as evidence that her choice had succeeded in prompting meaningful discussion about how contemporary institutions should handle legacies from previous eras. The palace's response to media inquiries was carefully measured and respectful of different viewpoints. The official statement acknowledged the complexity of the tiara's history while explaining the thoughtful process that had led to the decision to wear it during the Japanese state visit. The statement emphasized Catherine's deep research into the piece's significance and her consultation with cultural experts and historians. Educational institutions and museums around the world took notice of the renewed interest in the lotus flower tiara and used the moment as an opportunity to discuss broader questions about cultural artifacts and their histories. Several major museums announced special exhibitions or educational programs focused on how contemporary audiences could engage thoughtfully with objects from complex historical periods. The impact extended beyond immediate media coverage and public discussion. Cultural organizations in both Britain and Japan reached out to the palace to express interest in collaborative projects that could build on the positive response to Catherine's appearance. Several proposals emerged for exhibitions or educational programs that would explore the artistic and cultural exchanges that had produced beautiful objects like the lotus flower tiara. Catherine herself was invited to participate in several academic conferences and cultural events as a speaker on topics related to historical preservation and cultural sensitivity. While she would need to consider these invitations carefully given her other royal duties, she was pleased that her decision had opened doors for meaningful engagement with scholars and cultural experts. The success of the tiara's debut also had implications for other pieces in the royal collection. Palace historians began reviewing other historically significant items that had been kept from public view due to concerns about their backgrounds. Catherine's approach provided a model for how such pieces might be thoughtfully reintroduced, with proper context and acknowledgement of their complex histories. Fashion designers around the world took inspiration from the lotus flower motif and the overall visual impact of Catherine's appearance. Several major fashion houses announced plans for collections that would incorporate similar floral themes, while jewelry designers began creating pieces inspired by the intricate craftsmanship of the historic tiara. The economic impact was also notable, with tourism officials reporting increased interest in visits to locations where royal jewelry was displayed. The Tower of London, which houses many of the crown jewels, saw a significant uptick in inquiries about tours and educational programs related to the royal collection's history and significance. Personal letters began arriving at the palace from members of the public who wanted to express their appreciation for Catherine's decision and their admiration for the thoughtful approach she had taken. Many of these letters came from people with their own complex cultural backgrounds who felt that Catherine's example provided a positive model for how individuals and institutions could engage with difficult histories while celebrating artistic and cultural achievements. The academic response was particularly meaningful to Catherine, as scholars from various fields began citing her approach as an example of how public figures could use their platforms to promote nuanced thinking about historical and cultural issues. Several universities announced plans for courses or research projects that would use the lotus flower tiara as a case study in cultural sensitivity and historical preservation. As the immediate media attention began to settle into longer-term discussion and analysis, Catherine felt a deep sense of satisfaction with the outcome of her decision. She had achieved her goal of bringing a beautiful and historically significant piece back into public view, while generating thoughtful conversation about the complex issues it represented. The positive response from cultural experts and the Japanese imperial couple confirmed that her approach had been appropriate and respectful. Looking ahead, Catherine recognized that her success with the lotus flower tiara had established new expectations for how she might approach similar decisions in the future. She felt ready for this responsibility and excited about the opportunities it might create for promoting cultural understanding and historical education through her role as a member of the royal family. The state visit concluded with expressions of mutual appreciation and strengthened ties between the two nations. The Japanese emperor and empress specifically mentioned Catherine's thoughtful approach to cultural representation in their farewell remarks, noting how her choice of jewelry had demonstrated the kind of international sensitivity that would be essential for building positive relationships in the 21st century. As Catherine reflected on the events of the past few days, she realized that the lotus flower tiara had become more than just a beautiful accessory or a historically significant artifact. It had become a symbol of how thoughtful leadership could transform potential controversies into opportunities for education, understanding, and positive change. The tiara would continue to be worn and admired, but now it carried with it a new layer of meaning that reflected contemporary values while honoring historical artistry. The story of Catherine's dazzling tiara debut had become a story about courage, cultural sensitivity, and the power of thoughtful decision-making to create positive change. It demonstrated that even the most traditional institutions could evolve and adapt while maintaining their essential character and values. For Catherine personally, it marked a new chapter in her role as a royal, one in which she felt confident to take on greater responsibility for shaping how the monarchy engaged with its heritage and its future.